Boy, we got to end it on a good note with not only Andy, but we got Sean Tindell, who's Commissioner, Department of Public Safety, and also Jim Brinson. Jim is an explosive expert. He's also Deputy Director of Homeland Security, and the Executive Director is also here. So we have a quorum. Baxter, Kruger. Good morning, guys, one and all.
Good morning, Paul. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. Let me throw this out, and again, anybody jump in. Sean, it's good to have you, sir. The FBI is, and this came from apparently the interview yesterday. The FBI is not fully convinced Trump was struck by a bullet. Now, to me, this is narrative from the left that does not want this to go down in history that this president was shot. It would be a lot better to say that he was hit by a piece of shrapnel. As an uneducated person in explosives, I would think shrapnel would mean other people possibly in the audience somewhere would also be hit by shrapnel. But first of all, where did the shrapnel come from? And thirdly, does it really matter if it was traveling at that velocity, if it entered the brain? Would it matter if it was a slug or high-speed shrapnel? I'll let any of you guys. Let me give this to Baxter first of all. Your thoughts?
Well, first off, whether it's shrapnel or the bullet hitting him or not, it's up for the FBI to figure out in their investigation. Mm-hmm. But either way, it's a deadly use of force that's attempting to assassinate a president. I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. So the relevancy as to whether or not it was actually a bullet or shrapnel doesn't seem to matter.
Does anybody know where the shrapnel came from? Jim, do you have any idea where it could possibly have come from?
It wasn't explosives. We actually reviewed the audio. If something would have exploded, it would have been a lot louder, obviously, than the gunshots. Bullet could have hit something prior to getting to President Trump, teleprompter, something like that. Maybe a shard of glass off a teleprompter. It could have been a piece off of, something between him and the shooter. It wasn't explosives. Obviously, it would have been a lot louder, and a lot more people would have gotten hit by shrapnel.
Sean, when something like this happens, does the Department of Public Safety go into any kind of an alert or any of the different stage of awareness?
Certainly. I mean, as soon as it starts happening, we start communicating, and our team, not that it's an immediate threat with us, but something we want to stay on top of. And there's routinely political events in our state, and we want to make sure we're on top of security, if even on the local level, if they want some help. But, and Brinson and I and Baxter and I and Colonel Davis and I have had conversations about when these events come to our state, just making sure we're prepared and this kind of thing doesn't happen on our watch. And so I'm proud of the team at DPS. Routinely when we have dignitaries come, we'll have briefings and really prepare to make sure that these individuals are safe when they come to our state. And it seems like an epic failure, and the reality is whether it was shrapnel, whether it was a bullet, whatever it was, President Trump is lucky to be alive, and there was clearly somebody trying to assassinate him that day, and the left can spin it any way they want. But, that's what they do. You listen to the president's speech last night, and he talks about democracy being under siege and at risk, and the Democratic Party is the ones that are circumventing the democratic process by just taking the chosen one and putting them on the biggest stage in the world and have a shot at being president of the United States. It's just ridiculous.
I'm not sure where that is in the Saul Alinsky Bible of doing that, but it ought to be number one. Just tell them what you're doing and tell them the other people's doing it. So, and it's been doing, and they've been getting away with that for a long, long time. Jim, let me call on you as far as an explosive expert. What about this whole situation doesn't sit well with you?
The simple fact that someone's actually able to get that close to a former president and take a shot is concerning. That was a very, very close distance. I know working with Secret Service in the past, they've been very professional, very detail-oriented, and we've tried to make sure that we've covered everything. And that was very surprising that someone was able to get that close. As of yesterday, obviously, we started looking at and talking about the explosives that were found from the shooter. That's concerning. We're still, obviously getting information in our community about what he had and how they worked, so we can train our people on those types of devices that he had. But very concerning that, one, he was actually able to have that in his vehicle there on scene, and that he was actually able to get on that roof and get that close to former President Trump.
Was the intention just to blow the car up, or do we know yet exactly what the intention was for this remote control device?
So we don't know exactly what his intentions were. It could have been that once he was done, he could use that for a distraction to be able to escape, or it could have been actually to attack the first responders once they went to his vehicle, if he was still able to detonate those devices. It's hard to determine exactly what he was thinking.
Yeah, I was reading an article earlier, and we were talking about the difficulty of if he bought the precursors of this, put them together himself, a blasting cap. It would be almost impossible to do it at home without the parents knowing about this. And for a 20-year-old kid to be able to buy these things and do it himself is pretty amazing, wouldn't you say?
Yes, sir. So making improvised explosive material is difficult to get the recipe right to actually make a viable explosive that would work. Mm-hmm. It's chemistry, but it's just like anything else. You have to make sure you get the chemistry right to, one, make sure you don't blow yourself up while you're making this in your garage, and to make sure that it's actually going to do what you want it to do. As far as putting in the electronics and the detonation system, it's quite tedious. It takes somebody with a lot of expertise to be able to do that. And you would hope that a 20-year-old who's still living at home, parents or somebody would have noticed that he was making these devices.
The guy that I was reading for, the author of this, is an explosive expert too, and he's talking about there's also, when you're putting this together, there is a smell. It's almost cooking like making methamphetamines. It's going to be very difficult for someone in the house with you to not know that there's something going on.
Yes, sir. So depending on the type of explosive, improvised explosive material that he was trying to make, a lot of those do have a very pungent odor when you're making them, whether it's something that you're cooking, which would be very similar to a meth cook, or if you're just mixing these different compounds, you need to have some sort of respiratory protection because the odor is definitely pungent.
Baxter, when you hear some of the questions being asked about the encryption part of this, where does that take your imagination?
I think as you're referring to Director Ray's testimony yesterday when he was talking about the extraction from the phone where there were highly encrypted messages and it was difficult to extract. In our office, we have the Digital Forensics Lab, which is a DPS effort. There's a number of systems that we're able to plug phones or computers, other electronic systems in to pull information out. That can be a tedious process, and depending on what type of phone and what type of system we're using, it can be difficult to extract sometimes. Technology continues to evolve, and our methods have to evolve with it. I think with what the FBI has and what they've been able to do as far as extracting information from that device and decrypt those messages, it's a matter of days, a matter of time before they get everything that they need to complete their investigation. You can't even tell where it is. In other words, if it's overseas or until you have it decrypted. It just depends. Deciphered. It depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for something that's actually in the device itself, you can tell what's on the phone. You can look at it. It may be that they're encrypted in a way that you have to put a cipher in to figure out what it is that they're texting about or what they're saying. But as far as backtracing like phone calls or anything like that, those things can be masked in a number of ways. But we have systems as well as the FBI to backtrace those calls and determine where they originated and where they terminated. So you believe they'll get to the bottom of this sooner or later? Yes, sir. I hope so, and I hope that we get a full, transparent report from the FBI on this. I did have to ask you this, Sean, this one before. I think it was when the Congressman Michael Guest and a bunch of the congressmen went out there, and they saw it for themselves. One of the guys mentioned this. He said the thing that stood out in his mind, and he was a Democrat, as a matter of fact, made some sense. He said the thing that stood out to him is this was a terrible place to hold the event. Water tower, trees, a multitude of buildings kind of nestled in between this. So if you were going to have it there,
you better have the utmost of security. And that statement kind of stood out to me. Now, you've been here when Trump has come to the state. I want to ask your experience on just doing the site survey and everything else. When we return, right after this. Back to our conversation, and again, it's with Jim Brinson, who is the Deputy Director, the Executive Director, Baxter Kruger, and of course, the one and only Sean Tindell, the Commissioner, Department of Public Safety. And yesterday, or day before yesterday, the Homeland Security Committee was meeting. Pennsylvania State Police Commissioner Christopher Parrish was there, and he said there was a text thread that was going on. They took a photo of him at some point when he utilized the rangefinder. Suspicious was heightened. I know from an interview that was immediately relayed to the command post of the Secret Service. Just over 10 minutes later, the Secret Service spotted him on the roof of the building about 150 yards away from the podium where Trump was set to address the crowd. The amazing thing about this, guys, is that it didn't get to either Trump's people or the Secret Service around Trump on the stage to say, get him out of the way and off the stage until that can be mitigated. Sean, is that one of the biggest failures?
Absolutely, and one of the issues that I have heard come out of that is the communications and radios and the abilities of the feds and the states and the locals to all communicate on common channels. Mm-hmm. I will say in Mississippi, we have 80 of 82 counties that are on our MISWIN system that allows us to use common channels so that our law enforcement, both state and local, as well as our federal partners that come in these kind of events, can get on a common channel and communicate regularly throughout these kind of events. And we were just talking about when former Vice President Pence came, and we had him at the book fair at the Capitol, the amount of security and planning that went into that. And that also included communications and radio communications and common channels so that we could stay on top of what everybody was seeing. So I want to give kudos to our team. I mean, with Director Kruger and Deputy Director Brinson, our folks at NBI, our entire team, they just do an excellent job, and I've been so impressed. You know, I'm coming from the outside, and I'm a former prosecutor, and watching these guys work in preparation, it's been educational for me. And being the kind of leader I am, I just get out of the way and let them do their thing. So I don't know if Brinson or Baxter would like to elaborate on it, but, you know, these guys have military careers, law enforcement careers, and they're up to date on all this kind of stuff.
Well, to either of you guys, you're talking about this, when this happens and you get the word that President or Vice President or the former president is going to be in town, how early does that start as far as site review? And it's got to happen several days in advance.
Yes, sir. So normally we get notified by the dignitary protection, in this case, Vice President, President, former President. Secret Service will notify us that they're coming. We would have a meeting with all of them. Way prior, a lot of that kind of depends on when they get notice that the dignitary is coming to Mississippi. Sometimes it's short notice, sometimes it's long. But the first thing we do is we meet, we look at site, where they're landing, travel, the whole 9 yards, and then we go out and actually do a site review with Secret Service. And Secret Service normally has an individual married up with the different teams from the state and local, whether that's tactical, explosives, command post, command and control, and we look at every aspect that we can when the individual's scheduled to show up.
Kruger, let me ask you, or the commissioner, in the limited experiences that you've had, it's not that somebody of that nature is going to be in our state that often, but have you ever heard anything about the Social Security being understaffed? The Secret Service being understaffed?
Well, and at times what we find, and I'll let them elaborate, is they reach out to us, and in our sense of being prepared and making sure that we're on top of it, probably because they deal with it every day, and we don't deal with it quite as much. We want to make sure that we're on top of it. So we started pulling all our assets together right away, try to making sure that everything's surveyed. Especially like in this incident in Pennsylvania where you had a building in that close of a perimeter with that pitch of a roof, that would have been something that would have had somebody on it in Mississippi. And so we were probably overly cautious when it comes to preparing for those things, but I don't think you can be overly cautious, and that's how we keep it from happening.
I would ask, and I won't do it, but I could have asked either of you gentlemen or any of you gentlemen, certainly Baxter and Jim, who are with Homeland Security, what your physical reactions were to the slope controversy from the former Secret Service director, but I won't do that for you. Is there anything in the manual that you guys have as far as Homeland Security about slope roofs?
No, sir.
No degree at all on that one.
If we can get OSHA out of the way, we'll put somebody up there.
OSHA was the only people who were not there, as far as we know. The other thing is this: have we got any tick up, since I have you in the studio here, any tick up on Homeland Security alerts in the state of Mississippi?
As far as threats go, we haven't seen anything necessarily increase where we've been monitoring. We've obviously, in the wake of this, adjusted some of the things that we're looking at and keeping an eye on. But I would not say that we've had an uptick in any kind of threatening messages here to local in Mississippi. I would like to add that we've got a great relationship with our local RA at Secret Service here and work very closely with them, most recently on the protection detail side with the president coming to Rolling Fork after the tornadoes. And inside of the Department of Public Safety, we work very closely with our partners at Bureau of Narcotics, Capitol Police, Highway Patrol, and MBI, obviously, and CTED to that extent, as well as the locals. I think that no matter who comes to Mississippi, whether they be a current sitting president or a former vice president, as Commissioner mentioned, Commissioner is going to make sure that we have every asset reasonably available that we need to provide that level of protection.
Got it. One of the great things about living in Mississippi and being a native-born Mississippian is that we are a rural state, and sometimes people want to tag us to that. But in instances like we're not a hotbed for Palestinian protest, number one, because of the population. Number two, because it's just too damn hot for some of these people to survive. And I'll take that as a plus. But it's a situation where we do have a lot of times when we're talking about Homeland Security, we do have a nuclear reactor here. We have the Mississippi River, the Tennessee Tom Bigby, and we're always cautioned that those things do mean we have to be alert.
Absolutely. And again, these guys do a great job monitoring all those assets, trying to protect our schools. And now we're getting into the cybersecurity realm, and Homeland Security is helping lead the effort on that from a state perspective. And they do a great job with that. And I would like to add, the men and women of the Secret Service, the ones that we deal with, the FBI, they all do a great job. They're great Americans that are trying to do their job the best they can, and so we appreciate their cooperation, and even on that day, I mean those men and women put themselves in the line of fire trying to protect the president. And so I applaud those that do it with the passion that they should.
I do know we had a lot of pushback on the women, the ladies who were part of that detail to guard him, because number one, Trump is a lot taller than them, and I think that did make a difference. And I think it was a very reasonable question to ask. Why would they put them in there? And I know she tried to answer that question in a legitimate way. But the problem with that is when you saw her detail, most of them were really tall guys. So she didn't have an answer for that. While I got you in here, Commissioner, any update as far as the Highway Patrol class?
Yeah, so applications are going through mid-August, and we already have, I think, about 600 people that have applied, which is more than we had last year.
Yes.
And so very exciting things developing there. Colonel Haynes is doing a great job along with Lieutenant Colonel Ivory, and we're looking forward to getting more troopers out on our roads and then getting them into our state police force, helping with MBI and our other divisions.
What's the status of the new building?
It's coming along. We're about to enter phase 2. We should be in sometime next year. And again, for public safety in our state, and I've said this repeatedly, having all 11 divisions of the Department of Public Safety under one roof is going to help improve what we do. We're trying to with our Fusion Center that's going to be there, also at a statewide real-time crime center. Where we'll be able to monitor actions across the state and work with school districts and other things to have live feeds into our real-time crime center. So
it's going to make a tremendous difference. What will not be there? Is there anything that will not be there?
The only thing that our Criminal Information Center will be right down the road. Malota will be right down the road there in Pearl on their campus. That's the Mississippi Law Enforcement Officer Training Academy. And Capitol Police will have an office there, but obviously with their main function being in the city of Jackson, their headquarters will be downtown. When you say next year, you're talking about first quarter, fourth quarter? Probably fourth quarter if I know the way state buildings go, but I'm hopeful that it could be sooner, but there's a lot of work to do to finish out the inside. Tremendously informative. Guys, thank you so very much for coming in on short notice too. Jim Brinson, also Baxter, Kruger, and of course Sean